We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning. It's Monday, and welcome to the Monday edition of Free Association Radio. My name is Robert Phoenix, and right now I'm watching my cats lick each other. It's actually a really interesting kind of scene. I have this this bookshelf that I got from IKEA. It's one of their like mega kind of storage things with 4 rows and, you know, the big squares that you put the plastic containers in. Anyway, it's like Hollywood Squares, right? And in the upper square are my 2 cats. And they're hanging out there having a little love fest. Well, one cat just bit the other one. It's taking a decidedly aggressive turn. How is everybody? I'm still recovering from yesterday. I had a super intense weekend, and Saturday was cool. You know, no worries, no problem. Saturday, very laid back. Had a good time with my kid. We barbecued. You know, did father-son kind of kid things, and then Sunday we had a baseball game, and everything kind of went off the rails yesterday during this baseball game. Now, I'll set the stage for you. My kid is just turned 9 years old. So he is the youngest kid on his team and probably one of the youngest kids in his league. And there are kids in his league that are 10 getting ready to turn 11. So physically, they're pretty, they're more advanced than he is. But he's a pretty good athlete, so he got there because he looked the part. And they have these things called tryouts. And during tryouts, you show basically what you can do. So he got drafted. They have 2 divisions, an upper and a lower. He got drafted by the upper. Should have been in the lower because he's younger. He's in the upper, so he's got a big learning curve. So we got up there on Saturday, or Sunday rather, makeup game, and bases loaded. Last inning, down by 2 runs. If he gets a hit, he keeps the inning going. If he strikes out, game is over. And it's my kid. It's my kid who's up, who has not gotten a hit, by the way, all season. Doesn't mean he's not a good player. He can do things reasonably well. He's a pretty good fielder, actually. He's a good base runner. He can throw people out. In fact, he threw somebody out on Sunday, made a good play. But there's this transition he's having a hard time with hitting because kids are throwing the ball, not adults. And last year, adults were throwing, and almost every time it was a strike, and almost every time it was at a speed that he could hit. Now the pitches are coming faster, they're erratic, and he's got to figure out what's a ball, what's a strike, and it hasn't clicked yet. So he's actually pretty good at finding out what a ball is. but he's not really crazy about finding out what a strike is because he doesn't want to miss. He's figured out in his head it's easier for him to determine a ball than it is a strike. And most of the time, he'll get a ball if he waits. So he walks a lot, gets on base. Well, yesterday he did not have that luxury, and on a 3-1 count, the pitcher threw 2 straight strikes, struck him out, bases loaded. That's my kid, game over. Of course he has a meltdown. And of course, because it's in Texas, everything is uber competitive, and it was my kid who lost the game. And that's hard. That's a hard, hard place to be for him, right? For him, because, there's all this sort of psychic attention. And when you get into these moments, you realize just what a psychic pressure cooker emotions can be at a young age. And, of course, now I'm the parent, and that's my kid, so I got to deal with my own kind of residue of shame around the whole thing. And then, of course, I had no ability to really connect with him afterwards because that was his mom's day to take him home, and she did. And so I wound up having a kid who had a pretty rough experience. And it's like, wow, what do I do with that? And there's more, and I'll save you the rest of the drama. But it was interesting because as a parent, and, I'm kind of new at this game. I'm late in the game, but I'm new in this game. You reach a point where there are things you just cannot do for your kid. You can help them. You can get them there. You can provide everything that they need. And then it's up to them to do the rest because I can't go up there and swing a bat for them. And that's the frustrating part. And I think I understand now, and I know it's a cliche, what my parents went through, at least my father. So onward. But I dealt with that, and it was kind of intense because it was his pain, it was my residue pain. You know how these things work. So I'll get him back later in the week, and hopefully we can write the course and at least keep his attitude good. But in the grand scheme of things, is that really the most important thing in the world? Probably not. In my life, yes. In your life, maybe not. In the big bad world, definitely not. Let's just check in with some headlines here. Gold is on its way down. If you have it, you may want to start thinking about selling it. I'd read that the spike price was set at $15.25. It hit it, and now it's going down. You may want to sell off your gold. I think it's the time. Now, there are things that you can do. You can get into dollars. The dollar, though, not great. Depending on what your gold is, you may want to hedge it with some other currency. If you're playing the currency game, the Swiss franc is almost always impenetrable, although the rate of exchange is not really all that great or rewarding if you're holding on to dollars. However, if you got into gold at, say, 750 or 800, and you can convert now and get some Swiss francs, that may be a thing that you want to do. Bitcoin, I was asked about Bitcoin over the weekend. Bitcoin is interesting, but it's also incredibly volatile. We saw what happened last week. It nearly crashed. And my theory about Bitcoin, and I have not been able to corroborate this, I've been trying to get a hold of James Clandestine, who knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, or maybe I'll bring Patrick on Friday to talk about this. But my feelings about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin was set up to be an alternative currency. And there are lots of different things. I mean, Bitcoin is pretty sophisticated. They have wallets, and you can basically spend Bitcoins. It's really very well thought out. You essentially change your money into this digital currency. There's no hard cash around it. There's no, bits, meaning bits of information. However, it feels to me, and this is just a hunch, I don't know anything in terms of the actual mechanics of Bitcoin or what's happening, but it feels to me that system might have gotten infiltrated over the past few weeks, which kind of helped almost nearly crash it. And it could be developed as the alternative default currency, the electronic currency, once the dollar goes away. And there's a very good chance that we would see the demise of the dollar in the near future. All you have to do is look around. Australia just got off the dollar. It's a big moment. They are moving towards they're moving towards what's called a basket of currencies versus the almighty dollar, which is the petrochemical dollar. It is the oil Bourse dollar. If you want to buy oil, you must buy in dollars. This is what Nixon did. This is what he set up when he was in office. So if we see what's happening in Australia, well, the writing might just be on the wall here shortly. So if you have gold, you may want to diversify. People asked me about Bitcoin over the weekend, and I said it's always good to hedge. Why not? If you put some money in Bitcoin. I think that the long play in platinum and maybe even palladium is very interesting. Platinum's gone up, palladium's gone up. Silver is gold's, redneck cousin. Silver is gold's white trash cousin. And I think that the silver market will also experience a downturn as a result of the gold downturn. You're going to see a big sell-off in gold. It's coming. So if you have it, you may want to get ahead of the curve. Unless you're just super, super, super vested in it and you want to hold long, you can do that. Because it might have some more longer term value than currently. When I say longer term, I'm talking maybe 2, 3, 4 years out, easily. So there's a lot that happened this weekend outside of my baseball drama. One of the things that you need to keep an eye on is you need to keep an eye on the bird flu in Asia. This is from Bloomberg. Let's read this here. This is a bird flu surge in China's first H7N9 pandemic vaccine preparations. Okay, so this is important to understand. We had the failed swine flu mass vaccination, which took place, or tried to take place, back in 2009. And the bird flu seems to be gaining momentum in China. Again, you got to use your discernment here to find out what's real and what's being leaked to you so you can be prepared to receive the H7N9 vaccination. So here we go. This is from Bloomberg. A surge in bird flu cases in China increases the pandemic potential of the H7N9 strain, according to a Beijing-based supplier of influenza vaccines to the Chinese government. Sinovac Biotech, first company to win regulatory approval for a swine flu shot in 2009, is preparing to make immunizations against the new virus that's infected dozens of people in China and killed 13. Hey, let's get the patents, and hey, let's leak it out so we can make millions on the vaccine. The NASDAQ-traded company will hold off producing the shots until it's received an order from the state, said Chief Executive Officer Yin Wai-dong. Okay, so this company, Sinovac Biotech, is being traded on the NASDAQ. So we have a Chinese company making bird flu vaccines being traded on the NASDAQ. Flu labs around the world are developing vaccine seed strains to serve as a template for bulk immunization production should it be required. While there is no evidence that H7N9 is spreading easily among people, it hasn't been detected in humans before, so they have no natural immunity. So if you think about it, let's just stop right there, because I do this. We have to break this down. It's never been detected in humans before, so what it's done is it's jumped species. And the only way that it can jump species is if there is some transmutation of the original virus that includes a viral key that unlocks the door to the human body. Because rarely do animal diseases and human diseases jump around, or animal virus and human virus jump. It's pretty rare because there's a whole different set of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a whole different set of immune locks and keys inside the human body. This is why we've been protected over hundreds and thousands of years from every now and then things happen, like anthrax or, every now and then things do happen. However, we just don't normally get animal viruses and vice versa, but it's happening now. And it's because there's cross-splicing taking place in these laboratories. Okay, so here we go. It hasn't been detected in humans before, so they have no natural immunity. That raises global health concerns. Researchers at the Centers for Disease Control, yes, our good friends at the CDC, who post really funny pictures about zombies on their website, and Prevention Atlanta said last week, the risk of this becoming a pandemic is increasing, Yin said in an interview at the company's headquarters in the Chinese capital, where a second H7N9 infection was reported today. Of course. Oh yeah, it's real. There's a risk out there. You better buy our vaccine. In fact, buy hundreds of millions of shots of our vaccine. Because we stand to make a lot of money off this. We're really not in this for you, although we appear to be really in it for us. Over the past 2 months, 61 H7N9 cases and 13 deaths have been reported by health authorities, mostly in China's eastern provinces. About half the infections occurred this month, suggesting the pace of transmission is increasing. The H5N1 bird flu strain, which killed at least 371 people in Asia and Africa over the past decade, hasn't acquired the ability to spread easily among people. Yeah, imagine that. Let's infect birds with this virus, because they'll be the best carriers of the virus. They'll go all over the world and they'll spread it to humans. Just didn't work. Did not work. In 2009, a novel swine flu virus known as H1N1 touched off the first influenza pandemic in 41 years, showing how diseases of livestock can spill over into human populations, causing a contagion. The only way they spill over is if they're manipulated. Bigger threat. This is a much more serious outbreak than H5N1, which from 2003 until now only infected 43 people in China, Yin said. Sinovac has notified its suppliers that it may need to order additional fertilized chicken eggs to produce H7N9 vaccine. Yin said the company doesn't usually require the eggs in the second half of the year when the bulk of Sinovac's seasonal flu vaccine has been produced. He said, under an agreement, China's Food and Drug Administration, a Sinovac vaccine for pandemic flu doesn't need to undergo clinical testing because its production methods have already been approved, and the pandemic flu vaccine would only represent a change in the viral strain. So they don't approve anything. Once they get sort of the original template for the vaccine, they rubber stamp it, and then you just do whatever you want and then put it out into the marketplace. That sounds safe, doesn't it? Ready in July, based on typical vaccine development and production schedules, a batch could be ready for commercial use by late July. Circle July in your calendar. Yin said, adding that he is urging the World Health Organization and its affiliated labs to expedite the preparation of seed strains. Sinovac has the capacity to produce about 30 million to 40 million doses of flu vaccine annually, said Yin, who founded the company in 2001 to make immunizations for hepatitis. The price to the Chinese government is about 20 yuan or $3.23 a piece, he added. The company's egg-based manufacturing process can supply vaccines with or without an aluminum-based chemical additive called adjuvant, which heightens the immune response. It is also able to make vaccines based on either whole or split viruses, Yin said. To contact Bloomberg News staff for this story, Daryl Liu in Beijing. So really what we have here is an advert for Sinovac on Bloomberg. This is what this is all about. If you are an investor and you're looking on the NASDAQ, you're saying, you're stroking your chin, bird flu. Could be big numbers in China. Let's throw down on that, shall we? I'm just sharing this with you because it's out there now. We're seeing it. It's getting some traction, And whether or not it is actually taking people down, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is the perception, and what matters is how people react to this, and what matters is the money that is driving this whole experience. Create the problem, right? And then create the solution. This is how it all works. This is the Hegelian dialectic as it relates to immunology and viruses. Problem, reaction, solution. The problem is the virus. Well, if you create the problem, there's a reaction. People don't know you're creating the problem. But there's a reaction. Oh, we got to get vaccinated. We need those vaccines. Solution, pop up hundreds of millions of vaccines and have Sinovac make a boatload of money. I wonder who's on the board of Sinovac. Let's just kind of check that out for a second. Sinovac Biotech Limited, it's trading at $4 US a share on the NASDAQ, and it's up 4.94%. Very interesting. So let's go. Where is the information for Sinovac? Maybe it's here. Let's see here. What do we have here? It might be the same page. I think it's the same page. I'd love to know who's on the board of directors for Sinovac. I have not researched the company that close. Let's just do a quick search here because we can do this. This is live radio. In the power, the wonders of the internet. I'm at Sinovac.com. And a slight spike upwards on the bird flu pandemic. Okay, investor relations, corporate governors. Let's find out who the corporate governors are. Let's see. All right, so we have somebody by the name of Simon Anderson, and then Yuk Lam Low, Ming Mai, and Kenneth Lee. Those are the board of directors. Let's see. Hold on, let's look at the board of directors here. All right, so there's a lot of information on Sinovac, but keep your eye on them, and keep your eye on this whole bird flu thing, because it's yet another piece for us to contemplate. Over the weekend, Venezuela held its elections, and Nicolas Maduro, the bus driving heir to Mr. Chavez, won the election. Maduro was Hugo Chavez's handpicked successor, and the guy is a bus driver. That's how he started out. And he beat out now they might both be New World Order candidates, but he beat out the preemptive or the preeminently chosen New World Order candidate in Enrique Capriles Radonsky. What a name that is, huh? So he beat out the challenger. The guy that they wanted to get in there to replace Chavez lost. This is from CNN. We're reading straight news today from trusted news sources. Denouncing election irregularities, Venezuelan opposition candidate Enrique Capriles Radonsky demanded a recount and said early Monday that he will not recognize the country's presidential results until every vote is counted. His comments came less than an hour after officials said the man, former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, handpicked to be his successor, had won the country's presidential role. With 99% of the votes counted, Nicolas Maduro won 50.66% of the votes. National Election Council President Tabise Lucena said, calling the results irreversible. Capriles won 49.07% of the votes, she said. Fireworks erupted over Caracas as Maduro spoke to cheering supporters, calling on Venezuelans to respect the results and respond peacefully. I have won by nearly 300,000 votes. It is the decision of the people, he said. The closely watched election was the second time in just over 6 months that voters in the South American country cast ballots in a presidential election. Chavez, who ruled Venezuela for 14 years, celebrated a triumphant re-election victory in October. After his death on March 5th, authorities announced new elections to select his successor. Maduro, 50, was the United Socialist Party of Venezuela's candidate. Capriles, 40, represents a coalition of opposition parties. So basically, they all threw in with this guy, Capriles Radonsky. Capriles is the former governor of Miranda State. He lost to Chavez in October's presidential vote, coming within 10 percentage points of the longtime leader. It was a significant gap, but the closest any opposition candidate ever came to defeating Chavez during his rule. More than 18.9 million Venezuelans are registered to vote in the presidential election. More than 68% of the country's registered voters had cast ballots by 3 p.m., Sunday election officials said. Far beyond Venezuela's borders, voters lined up at diplomatic offices around the world. Venezuela's National Electoral Council says more than 100,000 Venezuelans are registered to vote abroad in diplomatic offices in 88 countries. There are more than 37,681 Venezuelans registered to vote in the United States, according to government figures. By mid-afternoon, thousands had cast ballots in New Orleans. Many said they had traveled by car or bus for more than 12 hours to get there from Florida because Venezuela shut down its consulate in Miami last year. Beatriz Olivaria, who worked to mobilize voters, said it wasn't easy. While campaigning lasted for months before October's election, this time around the official campaign period was only a matter of days. It was much more difficult because the time has been short and the budget has been low, she said Sunday. But the excitement has been enormous. In addition to representatives from national organizations serving as observers, Venezuela's National Electoral Council says 170 foreigners have been invited to witness the elections in Venezuela. The international group includes delegations from the Union of South American Nations and the Atlanta-based Carter Center. Authorities detained 43 people Sunday for alleged electoral crimes, Major General Wilmer Barrientos told reporters. But elections officials said Sunday evening that the day had proceeded smoothly without major incidents. It has developed with total normalcy, with total calmness, said Sandra Obietas of the National Electoral Council. Polls were scheduled to close at 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard, but Barrientos said polling stations where voters remained in line would remain open until the last voter cast a ballot. As polls were closing on Sunday evening, Twitter accounts for Maduro and his party were apparently hacked, with posts denouncing electoral fraud. A group calling itself Lutz Security Peru claimed responsibility, while officials from Maduro's campaign criticized what they said were dirty tactics, blaming right-wing political opponents for the hacking. Both candidates' campaigns called on Venezuelans to await official results calmly after earlier Sunday, but they also appeared to be bracing for a fight with opposition leaders, decrying what they said election irregularities in Maduro's campaign, vowing to defend the election results. Capriles said in a Twitter post that some officials want to change the desire expressed by the people. Jorge Rodriguez, the head of Maduro's campaign, stressed that the election had been fair and called on Maduro's supporters to gather in front of the presidential palace. We will recognize the results, whatever they are, he said. And this way, we say that in the scenario that the anti-Chavista candidate wins by one vote, we will recognize it. The scenarios that we win by at least one vote, we are going to defend the victory with the people of Venezuela. So Chavez has a successor, a former bus driver, who is now president of Venezuela. And essentially it says to you boys and girls out there listening to Radio Land that no matter what you do or what your station in life is, if you know the right people and belong to the right party, you can become president of a third world country. Actually, that might even include this country, since we are now rapidly descending into third world status. The fascinating comparison with this is, of course, Barack Obama's very first election, his very first elected post. And when I come back and play some music, I'm going to tell you all about it. So hang in there for the next 30 minutes of the show, where we look at how Barack Obama rose to power. This is Robert Phoenix. You're listening to the Monday Mashup, and I'll be back in, what do we want to hear? I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Why don't we listen to, let's listen to My Doppelganger. Why not? Let's listen to My Doppelganger. Dominatrix. What do we want to hear? Why don't we do, how about Sound Vibrations? I'll be back in 5 minutes and 4 seconds listening to the Monday Mashup. This is Robert Phoenix, and here is Sound Vibrations, a.k.a. Dominatrix, a.k.a. me. I'll see you in a bit.
One of nature's greatest wonders is the ability of the human ear to distinguish among the millions of sounds around us. Listen. You will hear later how these characteristics are determined by the frequency, intensity, and form of sound waves in the air. Recognize those sounds? Surely. Loudness and quality. It's these vibrations which your brain interprets as sound.
Welcome back to the Monday Mashup. This is Robert Phoenix. It is the 15th. It's tax day, by the way. Oh boy, if you haven't filed your taxes, better get on it, because there's a lot more that chemtrail goo that they got to cook up and use some of our tax dollars in order to do that. So make sure that you get right out there and fund the system in all of its wondrous glory. I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little cynical today, but it's okay. I'll get through it. I have a nice, optimistic story I'm going to share with you. At the end of the show, we're going to end on a high note. Promise me, or promise you, trust me, it's going to end on a high note. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of circle back to is, in some ways, how Barack Obama rose to power, but it's actually his most important election was when he became senator in Illinois. And he bum rushed the position that was held by Jack Ryan at the time. Obama's career being elected was almost spotless. He did lose to Bobby Rush as a congressional candidate. That's the only time he actually lost. People don't really talk about that, but he actually lost to Bobby Rush. However, almost every other time he ran unopposed. Districts were redistricted for him so that he could get more votes. I mean, there's Chicago politics at its finest. And there was an early election where he lost the election. There was a recall, and then he wound up winning the election. But the big one was with Jack Ryan. And Jack Ryan was the golden boy of Illinois politics. He was a Republican, which was pretty rare for Illinois at the time, as being sort of hailed as the bright and shining light of Illinois politics. Jack Ryan had been tabbed to be a potential presidential candidate, and he was married to the very lovely Jerry Ryan, who you know as 7 of 9 on Star Trek fame, the sexiest cyborg in the galaxy. So what happened was that you had Obama on the left and Ryan on the right, and just before the election was really going to take off, Jack Ryan was getting a divorce from his wife Jerry, and they had a very nasty divorce, and the divorce records contained salacious details about sex clubs and eyes wide shut types of scenarios in which Jerry Ryan was asked to watch and or participate in live sex, group sex, with Jack Ryan and his power broker buddies. Well, that came out and was printed in the Chicago papers, and those details were leaked. Jack Ryan had to step down, and Barack Obama stepped in, won the election easily against Alan Keyes, who was flown in from Maryland to run against him. Was never going to work. And therefore, we have the continuing legacy of one Barack Hussein Obama. Every step of the way, his rise has been buttressed and backed. So now we have the election in Venezuela, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with 300,000 votes on the line, but it appears that socialism has survived to be the default party and the default system in Venezuela for at least the next 4 years. All right, so I said to you that I was going to read you something positive, and I will. Here's what I wanted to read you. We talk about at times so many things that are hammering us, and that we really can't do anything about some of those things. And we seem to be up against this, titanic, oligarchic machine, this machine consciousness that is hammering away every single day at who we are. However, the story I'm going to read you here is actually quite positive. And it's how a group of people in Maine are fighting back and actually winning. This is from a website that's called Other Worlds, Nurturing Just Alternatives. And the headline is Small Farms Fight Back, Food and Community Self-Governance. And this is by Tori Field and Beverly Bell. And this is part 10 of the Harvarding Justice series. So here we go. Heather Retberg stood on the steps of the Blue Hill Maine Town Hall, surrounded by 200 people. We are farmers, she told the crowd, who are supported by our friends and our neighbors who know us and trust us, and want to ensure that they maintain access to their chosen food supply. Blue Hill is one of a handful of small Maine towns that have been taking bold steps to protect their local food system. In 2011, they passed an ordinance exempting their local farmers and food producers from federal and state licensure requirements when these farmers sell directly to customers. The federal government has stiffened national food safety regulations in order to address the health risks associated with industrial-scale farming. Recent widespread recalls of contaminated ground turkey, cantaloupe, eggs, and a host of other foods illustrate the serious problems at hand. These outbreaks have been linked to industrial farms with overcrowded animals and unbalanced ecosystems. The significant distance between industrial farms and consumers creates a lack of accountability and difficulty tracing problems when they arise. Small-scale farming, however, doesn't spark the same safety risks. Small farmers who sell their food locally will tell you that the nature of their business based on face-to-face relationships with the people who eat their food creates a built-in safety protection. They don't need inspectors to make sure they are following good practices. Keeping their neighbors, families, and longtime customers in good health is an even better incentive. Customers are also more able to witness the farming practices firsthand. Still, small farmers are being pushed out of business because they are saddled with the financial and bureaucratic burdens of the same regulations as large industrial farms. Heather and her family's Quills Inn farm raise grass-fed cows, lambs, pastured pigs, chickens for eggs, and meat, turkeys, dairy cows, and goats. The diverse mix is better both for the land and the economic viability of the farm. Given the scale of their business, building their own chicken processing unit was financially out of the question. So instead, they were butchering at a neighboring farm's USDA-approved unit. When state inspectors told them that USDA regulations don't allow them to share this neighbor's facility, Quills Inn Farm was forced to stop raising and selling chickens altogether. I just remember the feeling that if it was happening to us, the same message was being given to all sorts of farmers of our scale, and people were just going to give up and stop farming, said Heather. My sense more than anything was a really daunting realization that, this is how farms get disappeared. And people are so supportive, but when we disappear, everybody might just kind of shake their heads like, it must really be tough to make it in farming. So Heather, together with a small group of other farmers and farm patrons in Maine, began crafting the local food and community self-governance ordinance, the first of its kind in the country. The ordinance exempts direct sales between farmers and customers at farms, farm stands, and markets, for example, from state and federal licensing and inspections. It allows Heather to sell chicken at her farm store, and Bob St. Peter, a fellow farmer and organizer, to sell his homemade cookies at the farmer's market. In March 2011, the ordinance passed unanimously in the town of Sedgwick, Maine. 3 days later, it was presented at Heather's town meeting in Penobscot. We spent a good while talking about whether to give $3,000 to our local library, says Heather, and I was sitting there thinking, whoa, this is a tough crowd. But then when the ordinance came up, it was another unanimous vote. It was tremendous. Other towns in Maine immediately followed suit. Since then, Heather says we've heard from people in Tennessee, Texas, California, Virginia, someone in New Zealand. Last year, Vermont passed a food sovereignty resolution with similar language. Over in California, they're working in the direction of an ordinance in Mendocino County. In Arizona, they're beginning to circulate petitions. And this fall, we heard that a town in Utah had passed the ordinance. Over the 2 years following Sedgwick's success, more than 8 towns in Maine itself have adopted such ordinances. As of this writing, Maine State Department of Agriculture is challenging one of the local ordinances by suing a dairy farmer, Community members are reaching out to friends in surrounding counties and national food justice coalitions, asking them to call in and urge the state to drop the suit. The case has drawn national attention. Meanwhile, organizers from far and wide are watching closely, hoping to launch similar initiatives in their own communities. In addition to efforts at the local level, farmers and activists are attempting to tackle the government's one-size-fits-all approach to food safety at the federal level. When U.S. legislators voted to increase Food and Drug Administration inspections and reporting requirements for farms in 2010, more than 150 food groups succeeded in winning an amendment that provides some exemptions for local farmers. Foodborne illnesses don't come from family agriculture, says Senator John Tester from Montana, who co-sponsored the amendment. So this is a really interesting development, and this is something I've been thinking about for quite a while as to how we can actually make a stand for things that are important for us. It's at the local level. It's at the level of food, because food is the most fundamental thing that we all have in common. It doesn't matter what your party politics are, unless, of course, you're a hardcore corporatist, conservative, or at a higher level, you're a hardcore corporatist liberal who bounces back and forth between Monsanto and whatever administration is in power at the time. Because at that point, or at that level, you don't give a shit. All you care about is your special interest. But the lower you go down that pyramid, when you get to the base of the pyramid, we all have food in common. And we all have food, good food, natural food, organic food in common for all of us. Doesn't matter. I could take somebody who is a conservative and somebody who's liberal and say, hey, would you rather have food that's good for you or not? And without really blinking an eye, they'd say yes. So here is where we find common ground. It is the most common and basic ground. And yes, it comes out of the ground. And what we do at that point is, okay, well, we agree on this. Where's the best place to agree on it? Well, we agree on it locally because we have people here that grow the food. I know Sam, the goat farmer. I know Linda, the artisan cheese maker. You have relationships with these people. The problem with the world at large is we have no relationship to anything beyond the local level, and becomes this massive abstraction, a massive abstraction. And then we have mediators to deal with the abstraction. And the mediators are the media. Media is a form of the word mediate. They're mediating the reality between you and the people that are making decisions at a high level. And trust me, things get lost in the mix in a huge way, But as you go down, if you go down the ladder, as you walk down the pyramid, right, as you move away from the eye in the center of the pyramid, you get down to the bottom, guess what? There are all kinds of other people there that are just like you. You have access to them. And this is where it's important for us to retain and maintain those relationships. And it's difficult because everything is pointing towards this monosaturation or this mono accumulation of consciousness in culture. One size fits all. That's where it's at. And we're seeing this at a very, very gross level in terms of what's being brought to us with Obamacare or whatever massive kind of program that is being drawn up and brought to you and me wholesale. So it's important for us to understand this. It's important for us to tap into our roots and retain our roots and to support people like Heather Redberg. So if you have time, look her up. If you have some time on the internet, look her up. Look at what's going on in your own community. Look at how, if you are feeling disempowered. I've got a friend on Facebook who looks around at the people that she lives with in her area, and she feels so distraught because they're all basically sellouts. Well, I guarantee you that if you search hard enough, you won't find people that are sellouts in your area. You'll find people that have some connection to the land, there's some connection to farmers markets, some connection to local farming, figure out a way to reach out to them, say, hey, I like what you're doing. Have you heard about Heather Repberg? Have you heard about what's going on in Maine? Because if enough people do this, then what will happen is that the system will ultimately have to respond to all of these little fires, these little forest fires. You see, this is what happened back in the 1960s. Cloward Piven. Cloward Piven was a strategy to basically overload the welfare system with all of these different requests. This, by the way, is, again, the whole concept of inserting a virus. You overwhelm the system, and then you go in the back door and you drop something else in. Well, that strategy can be applied also at a local level for people just wanting to protect their food. If you have enough of these groups that come together and pass these ordinances in small places, all over the place, that's 1,000 forest fires that would need to be attended to. And so then the states would have to say, okay, like what Maine is doing, Maine got a phone call. Hey, you got to stop this. You got to go after these guys. You can't let this happen. So Maine found one case, one isolated case, said, okay, this is the one that's the most vulnerable. We're going to go there. We're going to go after them, and we're going to set precedent. We're going to set precedent. And once we set precedent, you can't do it anymore, theoretically. So it's important. It's important to support these people because obviously people want to be supported. People want to be sustained, and people want to be nurtured. Jupiter's moving into Cancer this summer. This is a great time to do it. This is a great time to get behind sustainable nurturing companies in your area, and especially with food. It's a big deal with food. Food and water. Cancer is the most primary source of water, right? Most primary source of water. Pisces is the cosmic ocean. Scorpio is Loch Ness. Cancer is the aquifer and the well that is adjacent to your home. Support local water initiatives, support local food initiatives. We have a nice window here upcoming in the summer. It's time to do it. Okay, so there we go. We're ending on a positive note. Or at least I think it's positive. I hope it's positive. Thank you for bearing with me today on today's show. I don't have a lot of energy only because I was working out a lot of stuff yesterday. I'm being honest. Working through a lot of stuff and having my little St. John of the Cross moment at about 3 a.m. But we're here, and there is always another day. And as Steely Dan once said, any major dude will tell you that when the devil is at your door, in the morning he won't be there no more. Any major dude will tell you. You've been listening to the Monday Mashup. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. Support your local farmer. Buy their food. Even if it's a little expensive, buy their food. And see what you can do on a local level to keep them in business, keep them afloat. I'll see you on Wednesday with Navigating the Astrological Matrix, and Friday on the Friday Farcast. Cross your fingers, trying to get Freeman and Jamie on the show. We can talk about weird stuff and all these other things that Freeman is doing in his ongoing quest, experiments, and avuncular journey around the planet in consciousness. I'm Robert Phoenix. I will see you in 48 hours.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.